And welcome to the Diablo Podcast, your home for Diablo diehards, tryhards, casual, and hardcore alike. I am your host, Anth, and today I am yet again joined by the Dice Awards hosting, Diablo loving, kind of funny founding Greg Miller.
Hello, Xanth. How are you?
I cannot complain. How are you?
I'm good. Tired. Just came back from LA. We had like a 5:40 alarm go off this morning to get home from LA to do the Kind of Funny podcast and then get on here. So it's been a whirlwind, but I'm here.
And we were talking pre-recording, but you know it's the same level of excitement. Going to see a brand new premiere of a highly anticipated show coming on the Diablo podcast. Same levels. Last time you said
everybody I talked to last night, Neil Druckmann, Troy Baker, like, what are you doing tomorrow? Like, I'm going on the Diablo podcast with Xanth. You'll catch it soon enough, I'm sure.
Love it. So last time we were on, you said you were more nervous to do this show than anything else. How are you feeling today?
Incredibly nervous. You're like, you hit me up, like, can you come on? I'm like, I can come on, but I haven't played. You're like, no, that's perfect. That's exactly I'm like, all right, we'll see if that's what the audience's perspective they want is.
So I think it is perfect because we often talk about there are these different tiers of people playing Diablo, right?
Sure.
There are people who go all in and play it all the time, and like that's their game. And you had a great podcast not that long ago, and I cannot remember the guy you had in talking about games.
Matt Piscatella from Circana.
That is it. If you haven't listened to that episode, you should definitely go check it out because it was super informative. But Matt Piscatella was talking about how there are games that people are just spending, you know, the majority of their time on, as opposed to going out and buying new things. And for some people, that's Diablo. For a lot of people, that's not Diablo. Diablo is it is a dip your toes in, fight some monsters, and I think like having that perspective, those people often don't come on a podcast. They often don't seek this out, and I think it is good to get that kind of perspective. So thank you for providing that.
I'm happy to do it, and I just ask that the chat be kind to me. Everyone in the comments be kind to me.
Well, let's talk about that briefly because are you that worried? I think you have said the most, I don't want to say inflammatory, but you've drawn the most attention for a Diablo comment I think I've ever seen at the Dice Awards.
You can be mean. They can be mean about that comment. I just mean about my dedication to Diablo. All right. That's what I'm worried about. It's the same thing as when I came on the first time where it's like, you know, I listened to this show as a fan, but I listen to it when you're going and whoever you have on, I'm like, man, they play Diablo in a different way than I do. It's the same way when I listen to a Monster Hunter podcast or something. I listen to Palabros and I'm like, oh man, you guys, you consume this in a way I wish I could, that if I didn't have to go play the next thing or host the next thing or do the next preview, I'd be much more dedicated to it.
Yeah, I can definitely attest. I don't know how you have the stamina to do it all the time. Because I got, you know, we're PlayStation friends. I see you playing games and then, you know, jumping and jumping and jumping.
My favorite was you texted me once, you're like, man, I know it's review season when I haven't seen you online in a week and a half or whatever. And I was like, oh, I've been online every night. I just have to hide my activity now.
Right.
Speaking of, while I talk to you, I am going to open an app and download a game to my console over there that I just got. I forgot about. I downloaded the work console, not the home console.
Well, you know, thanks for big timing us on the Diablo
that's what
podcast.
I love to do.
But like to jump from game to game to game and reviewing games is so much work. I'm not. I think it's impressive that you have any time to come back to any game. That Diablo held your interest for as long as it has because there's always something else grasping at it. That's,
sure.
But again, I think you are indicative of that larger group of people out there that's playing and consuming this game. But before we get into Diablo, we're going to talk about Diablo. We're gonna talk about Path of Exile because we haven't talked about Path of Exile. So this is the section for all the people listening that enjoy Diablo. We're gonna dabble into Path of Exile. That's, you can skip, I guess. And then we're gonna come back. We're gonna speculate the future of Diablo and of Diablo 5 and what we want to see out of it. So, you know, I got to come on and do a preview for Path of Exile, and you weren't there. We didn't get a chance to talk about it. And I've been, you know, chomping at the bit here. I've heard you talk about it. You're like, oh, I'm really engaged with this game. You know, I heard your end of year rankings, and Path of Exile 2 was just like creeping up there, and I heard it and I
Yep.
heard it. So, what are you thinking of it? Where are you at? What are you
I
loving?
can't wait for more content. That's the big thing for me. Yeah, I have not touched Path of Exile 2 since probably 2 weeks after it came out in early access. And it was one of those, it strikes me a lot as Hades 2. Played it, loved it. Yes, I want this, but I want the final package. Like I again, back to how the job works for me of reviewing and previewing so many games. I don't want to play something that I'm going to have to come back and replay in terms of different states. I'd rather get to where it is final thing or the next big update or whatever it's going to be to jump in and try that. But top level, since we haven't talked about it, what an impressive game. Like, you thank God you're around because of course you were on it earlier. Like, Greg, you're going to want to play this. You got to play this. You got to play this. And I was like, okay, but like, I have Diablo 4. And at the time I was burnt out on Diablo 4. And we'll talk about that, I'm sure, where it was just like, I'm not feeling the need for another action RPG right now. Right. And so when you said I had to, and I got it and I jumped in, it was, whoa, like, what a different speed, what a different feel. Same look. You can look at a screenshot, you can look at a video and be like, oh yeah, it's Diablo, big deal. But to get in there and be like, oh, there's some more weight to it. There's more threat to it. There can be two enemies that I have to actually strategically think about how I'm fighting. And then of course, for it to bring in something that I feel is so Souls-like, which I know is not, but it's kind of is, of like, okay, there's all these bosses on the thing. I'm going to go fight them. I get there. This boss can kill me. Like, regular Diablo, when am I running in? Like, I'm actually, other than a hardcore run on super difficulty, when am I actually worried about dying? Path of Exile 2 really quickly was like, oh no, you can die here. Granted, it doesn't really matter. You start out there, you come right back in. It's not like you lost anything. But it was oh, cool, I have to think about this boss rather than just spam my attack. I have to learn their patterns, learn their dodge. Like, I thought everything they were doing in that early access launch was like, damn, this is really good, and I can't wait for it to be complete.
Well, I think the initial goal was about a year. I think it's going to take a little bit longer than that.
Classic game development.
Yes, but we are getting a major patch. Ideally, new classes. We'll hear more about it on the 27th is when we'll
Okay,
get
right
all
around the
those
corner. My mom's
details.
birthday.
Happy birthday, Mrs. Miller. An avid Diablo podcast listener, and
Avid.
she'll be in the comments. And then I believe April 4th is when it'll actually launch. And
Okay.
the general speculation is they're going to be introducing the Huntress class at the bare minimum, so you can start chucking some spears around like an old school
Love it.
Diablo Javazin, and it's going to be awesome. That's my power fantasy. That's what I want.
That's what you want. Okay.
I just want to throw spears that turn into lightning bolts. Is that so much?
That's cool. That's cool. We can
Right?
all admit that that's cool.
Yes, absolutely. But you said
So are you still playing PoE 2 like obsessively?
I took I always struggle with any ARPG in the cycle where once I know the new thing is around the corner, then the old, like it's that, the meme of like, I don't want to play with you anymore. I can be like, okay, I know something great's on the horizon. I can step back from this. And that's basically how PoE 2 has kind of been. I jumped into hardcore. Like I made it my goal. I'm going to get through all of this and get into maps on hardcore. I initially thought I was going to struggle to do that. I made it through 2 times now with different characters and have died way too many times. But like that has a tendency to lengthen the game out a little bit, where because I'm dying, like there's always a new goalpost and what have you. Yeah, and I was just playing not too long ago, just kind of testing a few things, but predominantly it's been on the back burner, much like
Gotcha.
Diablo. I found myself jumping into, just like I said, clearing out my backlog. Final Fantasy Remake and then Rebirth, just like slowly but surely kind of cleaning out all those things I've neglected, because next month is going to be crazy. As we were talking a little bit pre-show, next month is an ARPG lover's dream. We've got Path of Exile 2, we've got Last Epoch, and then we've got Diablo 4 all in a row. Have you played Last Epoch at all?
No.
Okay. I would say you should, but I know you don't have the time.
I think I already have it. Like, I think I have
might.
code redeemed somewhere, but I haven't started it yet.
It's a good middle ground. It's a nice.
Okay.
It's in between Diablo 4 and in between Path of Exile. Not as overtly complex. It's a little bit faster pace. It's fun. I recommend trying it. When you have time, right? You
Yeah.
you'll have so much of it, so you could just
Exactly. I was gonna say I've got that, just lying around.
yeah. You can easily whole ass several ARPGs at the same time and be
Of course.
totally fine. We said we were going to talk about it at the front, and we got so waylaid by random things. In tandem with all this, Path of Exile stuff, you had a major anniversary. 10
Sure did.
years.
Kind of funny turned 10. 10 years old. Kind of funny. 10 years old in January. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. 10 years providing content out into the world. The number one gaming podcast. Gaming
And number two.
podcast. And number one is like there's an ebb and flow. There's that edging between the two of them. I see like one jump over the other.
Yeah.
But that,
And then the besties comes in. They sometimes get it. I'm like, God damn it. You ruined the whole message.
but they're weekly, not every day. So
Yeah, exactly. That's how we cheat.
yeah.
Bury you in volume.
But there's always good quality stuff. But you guys have been at this for 10 plus years.
Crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you feel is the biggest thing that you've learned over that time?
Oh man. I think the biggest learning would be how much having your heart in the right place matters. I think the joke answer would be how much none of this matters. But what I would mean by that is like when the wheels fall off and this doesn't work and you have to change your plan, or, you're in the middle of a show and the show turns into a different show, all these different things that I think early on would have crushed me, would have been such a big problem, like didn't go exactly how I wanted. Like, I think realizing how little control you have over the universe and what you're making and how much the audience is there for that. I think that's the number one thing we hear, that, our audience is there to hang out with us and watch the shenanigans and see how it all evolves. And so when a Gamescast becomes a Kind of Funny podcast, when, we're trying to get home to live react to Xbox, but we're trapped on a plane. So we ask everyone to join us later when we actually land, and they do. Like, there's all these different things in there of, I think what makes Kind of Funny so special is the fact that, we are this live talk show network each and every work day from, 10 a.m. to usually 3 p.m., if not 4 p.m. with something live. It is the idea that it is still a small business. It is still the 11 of us, and everybody wears their heart on their sleeve and does that, I think having my son 3.5 years ago really was such a great perspective shift for me, a workaholic, where it is the idea that I've known, I had a rude awakening in January 2015 that as a small business, I wouldn't be able to do as much as I could at IGN. And I had to learn that lesson, and we had to learn how to pivot around that and do things with it. And I think even still, you go on, and then, when Ben gets here, having that, okay, the workday ends at 5, maybe 5:15, but that's the stop of that to go be dad, to go be husband. That was great for me. And I think really, hopefully, has then allowed me to lead by example with the team of, this doesn't need to be something we are doing at 9:30 at night every night. There's always going to be a rare exception. Next week is the Nintendo Switch 2 reveal event, right? And we are live reacting to that at 6 a.m., which means everybody's in at 5:30 a.m. So there's ridiculous days like that, but that's also part of the excitement and the charm of the job.
When it doesn't happen all the time, it is far more
Exactly.
special. It reminds me of a little bit of there's an expression in education, like when you're teaching, you just things go awry pretty quickly. It's far easier to steer into the skid than to fight it. So
That's a great way to put it. That's much more eloquent than mine.
yeah, but like,
nothing matters. This is what my takeaway. Nothing matters. 10 years in, just screw it.
Just pure nihilism at that point.
Just give it up.
What's the point? Okay, nihilism and steering into skids aside, it's a major milestone, especially in this business. And then do you get a check from all the right-wing grifters for every time you go viral, or is no sort of...
I wish nobody's kicking that back to me. No one's kicking it back when they want to take a clip out of context and just bag on me with no information. But I get a free laugh out of it. I get a free smile out of it. I get to watch and shake my head quite a bit as well. But no, sadly, I'm not getting a kickback from it. What a system that would be.
I'm sure there's a system out there. You just need to find a way to exploit it. Not here. Not on the
Not
Diablo
here on the Diablo
podcast.
podcast.
No, that's not how we roll. Okay, well, if you haven't at this point gone to Kind of Funny, you absolutely should, because this is not the place to get video game news that's not Diablo related. I get all of my Diablo or all of my video game news from you guys, so I appreciate it. And anybody else listening, go do the same and support them on Patreon if you can.
We would love that. Thank you so much. And of course, always be ready for you to come by. Your next appearance is always around the corner because there's always something happening with ARPGs. And you are an ARPG guy.
Yeah. I do even have, and it's happened once, but it could happen again, a small podcast within the Kind of Funny podcast. So you don't know when that's going to happen, but it could. Tune in.
We got to book you for April to do like the state of ARPGs. Here's what's going on. Here's what you need to know from all the ones that are doing things.
Yeah, that sounds great. And we'll chat later. Okay. So we came here to talk Diablo.
Yeah.
16 minutes in, I think we can do that. So Diablo's in this weird spot. We had a long podcast last week, kind of talking about, so we got the reveal of what the new season was. And if you haven't, been watching it, that's watching the news. I know you're paying attention all the time. But if you haven't been up to date, the season itself is very samey. It's going to be a borrowed power, like a vampire power, like a witch power, and then some new items. And they're going to elongate leveling, make it a little bit longer to get to 60, stretch it out a bit.
Yeah, I saw Rod talking about this, right, of trying to make it more challenging, I believe, is what they were talking about, right?
Right. And then we got a PTR and people test it, they break things. PTR is always weird because the point of it's to break it. So it's like, how do I act? Like, I can't form a true opinion yet.
Sure, fair enough.
But I think it's nice to chat with you, Greg, as we talk about lapsed Diablo players, right?
Please.
You played a lot of Diablo, right?
Sure did, yeah. My most played game of last year.
Right. That for somebody who plays a lot of video games, that says something.
Yeah, for sure.
You played a lot of Diablo. Have you been playing a lot of Diablo lately?
No. I burned myself out on Diablo, and it is a weird like 1-2 punch where we went down and did the preview of Vessel of Hatred at the Blizzard campus. So I played all that and I loved it so much, and then came home and I was like, I need to finish my platinum trophy in Diablo before Vessel of Hatred launches, which was in retrospect such a bad idea, because it was then me grinding it out, trying to get that level 100, trying to get this thing, trying to do, and it was all of that would have been so much easier after Vessel of Hatred launched and the buffs and changes they made. But I wanted it done before then, which meant that I just overate Diablo, where it was like I was coming down and like we kind of talked about the top, right? Like when I can find those free hours to play something that's not a review and not a preview, I'd go in there and grind this thing. And it was like one of those where I'm doing the thing of like, as we all do in every trophy obsessed mind, you get to that point where you're like, why am I doing this? I'm not even enjoying this right now. Why? And so I really just beat the hell out of myself doing that to then get rewarded with, here's the test build server for Vessel of Hatred. So play through Vessel of Hatred again, and granted I didn't beat it in the preview, but we played a lot. Come back in, do that, then have all that progress wiped, and then be like, all right, now do Vessel of Hatred again. And I know, as I know how you play, Xanth, that like doing stuff over and over and over again is Diablo for so many people. Whereas for me, I was one of the people who's been out of shape about seasonal characters, where I was like, no, I want one character that I come back to and, take on the new thing and da-da-da. So I had gotten used to that part of it, but this isn't even a new season. It's the same thing you've done now your third time, on top of being burned out from running Hell Tides all the time. I was just like, ugh, like I think I finished on my retail account, final account, the season or the story for Vessel of Hatred, but I think I put it down and have not touched it since. So that's a long time ago, and that's sad. Like I played so much Diablo last year and the year before that, where I think it was definitely for last year my most played game. I think the year before it was as well. Yeah, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was number 2, if not number 1. So it's like I played so much Diablo, and so then it's like sad that I haven't touched it. But then it's also like, how long could that possibly last? Like I've always wanted that game, that community. For so many people, it is Diablo. For so many people, it is Destiny. That thing you come back to all the time. And Diablo has been that. And I do think will be that again. I do think that we're going to get a season that drops where I'm like, oh, I need to be a part of this. I do want to roll a new character. You know, Jen sees something she likes and wants to play again, split screen or not split screen, co-op with me on the same screen. And we jump back into it. But right now, I don't see that happening, probably because I still have the giant, anime hard eyes for Monster Hunter, which I've always been a Monster Hunter guy and reviewed Monster Hunter at 42 hours, 45 hours, and then had to put that down for multiple weeks now. And just this past weekend, I was finally in between reviews and I got to go gorge on that for a couple of nights. And I was so happy to be back. Like, there's just so much going on. And back to the Matt Piscatella argument of just like, these games are only demanding more and more of your attention. Monster Hunter just announced today, right, in their presentation, new content for that game. It's just, even they keep making new games when they keep putting content in the old games. It's like, it's outrageous right now.
I think that's very fair. I mean, our co-host Nineball I've lost him to the wilds for a little bit. Totally fine.
Yeah,
makes sense.
Are you? I'm full stop. Sorry, now it's a Monster Hunter podcast. Are you a Monster Hunter guy? Do you play Monster Hunter?
I don't. Have
you ever tried?
I haven't. I have not.
It seems like it would touch all of the things, like check all the boxes you want. Yeah.
It is just never connected. Like, I've seen it. I've been like, I was literally at the store with my son the other day. We did like this random Saturday. It was rainy and crappy here. We took the kids to the store and we're like, all right, just buy something. Let's buy something that you can have fun with. My daughter chose this awesome trio of Nerf guns, and we went to town. I got shot in the dick way too many times. She figured out that weakness way too quickly. But I was saying,
like, there's it's like Shadow Colossus. Like, there's the weak point. Go for it.
I almost threw up. It was bad. But with my son, like, we went over, checked out the PlayStation side, and two big releases recently. You had Monster Hunter Wilds and you had Assassin's Creed. And I was like, I dude, just choose what you want. Choose either or. And he loved Ghost of Tsushima, so he opted for Assassin's Creed. So I was on the precipice of having Monster Hunter Wilds in the house with a reasonable justification, but it just didn't happen. So
how does he like Ghost? Or how does he like Assassins?
He likes it a lot. I think it's interesting, when you have a kid who, he's 13, he gets his information here and there. So like, he's heard random bits for Assassin's Creed from just like snippets on TikTok but snippets on TikTok from his friends. So he had like a preconceived notion of what Assassin's Creed was, and he was not necessarily inclined to go for it. But then, like, when given the choice, he's like, all right, I'll try it. And 2 days in, he's like, oh yeah, I'm actually really liking this. I was wrong. I had the wrong impression of what this game was. I'm like, hey, look at that. That's a good thing. That's growth. Maybe I have the wrong impression of Monster Hunter Wilds. Maybe I just need to get hands-on with it. Maybe I should learn from my son. That's good parenting, right?
Maybe you should. Yeah, right. And you give it a shot. I just sent you a code, so there, try that.
Oh, well then fine. I guess I will. Thank you, Greg.
Anytime.
This is how deals happen here. That's actually why I brought Greg.
We're making the content right now.
I brought Greg on for free game codes. You guys get to witness how it happens. That's the magic behind it. Okay, so I'm now going to play Monster Hunter Wilds, and Nineball is going to be happy. So that's thanks, Greg.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's go back a little bit though.
Bring back to Diablo. Where are we at then? So the new stuff gets announced, and what's the overall reaction to
it? Hit or miss. It is. There's some excitement. I mean, anytime you're getting something new to the game, the way it works now, the new system, they're when you kill bosses, you can steal their powers, and those are the new borrowed power system that they're bringing in. So like, you can have the laser beam from one of the world bosses, that the Walking Death. You could get Lilith's like wave. You could get like Gregor's lightning bolt. You can get Beast and Ice's ice stuff, all sorts of random things. But it's the same concept. Like, let's just give you
Okay.
some power that you grab from somewhere else that's not on your skill tree. It's not your Paragon board, anything like that. And you just that that's kind of what it is. So, new
Okay.
tools. It it'll be fun to play. They introduced a few new bosses. Belial from Diablo 3 is coming back, and Urivar, and then the end boss from Vessel, the dog version of Mephisto. So now you can fight him to get
Okay.
loot as well. But that's that's about it. Um, and I think it'll be interesting. So we have that contrast, and we talked a little bit about this on our last episode. Next, in 2 weeks, Path of Exile will drop its new content, and then how both of them handle new content is very different. Diablo is moving into this habit of kind of recycling some of the things that they've done before. Path of Exile likes to take what they've done before and build off of it. So all the stuff that you've done, you're essentially rewarded for your knowledge, right? Like,
Sure.
if they kept, think back to the vampire season, Greg, which I know you loved. I've got
I remember it.
I've got
Remember it well.
I've got messages to prove it, right? Imagine if you still could have the knowledge of those vampire powers. Like, you probably don't remember them. I couldn't even list off many off the top of my head, but if they stayed in the game and then we added things on top of it.
Sure.
Path of Exile is building a tower upward, right? Like, they start at the base and we're going to build on top of that. What Diablo's been doing is kind of keeping a one-story home and leveling
Yeah.
it and rebuilding
Yeah.
another one-story home each time. And I think, like, that's to the detriment. I think that's to a lot of what you're talking about with that kind of burnout. Like, I've already done that, right? I went through the story. I went through several seasons, and then if this season is the same, well, why am I coming back?
Yeah, everything you just mentioned, right? Like, I'm like, okay, cool. I'm not that player. Like, I'm not the one. I still think of my Diablo character as that first character I rolled in Diablo 4 Vanilla, right? My Genevieve that I made, that was my hunter that you guys pressured me into buying that outfit on my first appearance, right? Like,
I don't think we pressured you per
all
se.
I needed
I
was the
think,
nudge. All I needed
yeah,
was the nudge. You're like, I was like, you know what? Yeah, it clicked. And I love the outfit, so it's fine. But it's like, that's my character. I'd love to. So, like, oh, now you have these new powers, or like you're stealing from bosses. Like, okay, cool. Like, never been what I was looking for, never what I was vibing with.
right. Yeah, and I think, like I said, that is it's somewhat of a detriment to bringing people back. Like, going back to the Piscatella of it all, right? When you are competing against so many other live services, what are you offering that's new to bring
Yeah,
people back? And we were talking last time. I don't know if this season does enough to bring people back. Right?
sure.
I'm gonna play it. Like, I host a
You host the
Diablo
Diablo
podcast.
podcast. You have to play it.
Of course I'm going to play it. I am looking forward to it. But
Yeah,
I'm in the minority in that. So I think this is where I like having you on, because we don't get too many voices that are on that periphery where it's like, you're well tuned into video games. You played a shit ton of Diablo, but you bounced off. And I think there's valid reasons for that. How do we get the Greg Millers back into Diablo
yeah.
again?
It's a great question. I think I think you're on it. You even said it, but some of the comments were tiptoeing around it, right? Where I think it just has to. You have to have new stuff, and I don't mean new stuff of like a new power, a new thing, and like that you're taking from these people, right? Like, I think you look at what they did in the build up to Vessel of Hatred, not even Vessel of Hatred itself, right? Where it was Loot Reborn, it was this thing, here's a dramatic change to how the game plays and feels, and I think positive way, skewing towards fans like me that don't want to spend, their lives in every treadmill session playing it like yourself. They did that then dovetailed so nicely into, here's the new class, here's the new expansion, here's the new story, right? Like, that was all so good. But, I think, who was it? Oh, this hasn't even gone live yet. We hosted the Elder Scrolls Online podcast. We're doing a limited run series with them, right? And they talk in that across 4 episodes, which you should start watching and listening to when it drops in April. One of the things we talked about with them was the diversity of their player group. There is the people who log in every day and run everything, and then there are the people who check in every 11 months, or I'm sorry, they check it every year, and then they're gone for 11 months, right? They come in for whatever the big story beat they're doing is, and then leave. And I think that's the push and pull of these games is, what do you need and what does your player base need to look like to be a success and keep the lights on and keep the servers going? And what is Blizzard looking at this game to make it a successful, right? I think you look at me as a casual, quote unquote, Diablo player, and it is the idea that for me, I will be back to Diablo. I don't know what the season would have to be that I would be like, oh, that sounds great. But assuredly, the next expansion I will be. And Mike's the same way on my team, where he comes in and just crushes the story and bounces every time. And so, like, there's so many versions of players in your world that I think you have to keep the hardest of the hardcore, like yourself, satiated and coming back and doing that thing. But then to start getting outside of that and try to touch the more casual, more mainstream player, I think in a lot of ways that's a battle you can't win. Like, I don't know what Diablo could do season to season to make me go, oh, I gotta jump in, I gotta go. I mean, honestly, I guess for me personally, and like, I know I'm hot on Monster Hunter, I always have, and I love Monster Hunter, but to do a quick compare and contrast, right? Like, Monster Hunter, even though I haven't even, I'm not Hunter rank 100 or 150 or anything crazy like that yet. I will be. But it is the idea that, like, okay, cool. They did their announcement today of the Gathering Hub, and I'm like, I don't really care about that. They're bringing this new monster. Awesome, because that means new gear, which means a new look, which means this stuff. And for me, the connection I have to my Monster Hunter character every time around is I want the coolest look. I want the coolest thing. I'm, wearing the things as I go. You jump to Diablo again, where I'm rolling different characters. I would want a battle pass that has crazy outfits on it, something outside of just the normal doom and gloom, skulls and fucking fire and brimstone that I get all the time. Like, I would want something just completely nuts and crazy where I look at it and go, oh, I gotta have that because I want that to look goofy, and I want that for inevitably when I come back to do the next season or whatever, the next expansion, I'd want that piece. That's just what I personally would want, where I think the battle pass has to speak to me of why I'm playing for those rewards more than I'd get a power from anybody.
I think that's fair. Actually, I did bring that up on our last podcast. There's been some rumors about like trying to stray with the battle pass away from traditional Diablo. Like, the goal originally when they announced Diablo 4 was like, hey, we're going to keep it realistic. We're not going to get too crazy with it. And it's been a few years. At this point, my general consensus was, let's just get fucking weird with it, because it's not going to be a forever game. Best case scenario, every Diablo's had a 10-year life cycle. We're like, what, 3 years in? So it's time to get weird. It's time to just, who cares at this point? Like, we don't need
100%.
to keep everything super serious anymore, because why? Like, what are we doing? I set your tone early, but then start to deviate, right?
100%. I think, especially what you're talking about, where you compare it to Diablos of the past with a 10-year life cycle and all these things. Like, do we think Diablo 4 has 10 years in it? Like, no, we're in a way different video game industry right now, right? Where unless you are Fortnite, unless you are Destiny, which of course is definitely in a different spot than where it was when it started its campaign, like, you have to be bringing the heat every time if you want people to be showing up for these seasons, for these things. But I imagine it's diminishing returns each season, even whatever happens with the next expansion. Like, you'll get people back in the door, but you're never going to hit those highs of highs.
Right. And by comparison to Diablo 4's launch, there's more on the market now. You're not just
100%.
competing with your Fortnites, with your Destinies, or what else. You're competing with two other people in the exact same market space offering the exact same thing. And that's just harder if you're a known quantity, right? If when you're
Yeah.
deviating, I think that leads to more success.
Yeah, you got to turn heads, right? If every Diablo season, I feel like looks the same when I glance at it. Like, I'd like it to stand out and look way different. Be like, oh, this is something I need to pay attention to.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think there's a nice segue there, right? As we look Diablo 4 as a live service, I don't think makes 10 years, which means Diablo's too big of an IP to just die on the vine at 4.
Xbox didn't buy these folks to let these IP go nowhere.
Yeah. I there's questions on. I would imagine we get a second expansion, which would be the first time ever
Yes.
for a Diablo like that. We've never had 2 expansions.
Have they not promised that already? I thought they already said that they were.
Well, it was originally supposed to be this year, but then it got
Oh,
pushed, and then
okay.
we also have the announcement of BlizzCon coming back in 18 months. So the is the expansion before BlizzCon?
No way.
But then that's such a long gap because you went Diablo 4 and then Vessel of Hatred just shortly a year after, and then we're gonna go almost 2 years before that second expansion drops. Which,
Yeah.
hey, could make sense if it gets announced in that September during BlizzCon. You launch it October, I don't know, November, somewhere in there, but that that's such a long time.
Yeah.
But you also have to have something announced at BlizzCon. Let's not dwell on that. I think we're not gonna figure out expansion
Maybe I mean
timelines.
I'm looking at it's September 12th through the 13th, 26. Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe they do, especially if we're getting pushed. So they've already been working on it. Maybe you get it out before this, and then you have an announcement there or something Diablo related.
That would be cool. I would like, expansion a little bit sooner. That would also mean you'd have 6 more Diablo seasons before you'd ever even hear about an expansion, which is wild to think about.
Yeah.
I don't know, but we're not
I
gonna.
mean, if it's not ready, it's not ready though, right? And
Right.
again, this is back to the point of like I as a business watcher, God, I'm tired, sorry, but as somebody who commentates on the industry, as an industry pundit, I think your best bet is if you have nothing to say, then to keep quiet. Like if it is that, hey, we're just gonna do, like you're saying, 6 seasons, that's what we're announcing over and over again. You're speaking to a small audience, a smaller audience than the people who bought Diablo 4 than the people who'd be stoked for a new expansion, but you're also not stringing people along. And maybe, like we're saying, those seasons do get weird. They do take the feedback of them all being samey and start doing something to shake it up where it is something that would entice me to come back.
Well, let's see. It's not gonna be the next season, but maybe the season after. Um, but let's go further. So
Okay.
Diablo 5, right?
Sure.
What I think seemed preposterous years ago to like already be contemplating it. Let's talk about the future of the Diablo franchise. Let's talk about
Okay.
Diablo. And I think since you've been dipping your toe into ARPGs all around, it's kind of an a la carte of what would make the perfect Diablo for Greg Miller,
Wow.
right? Because you
Wow.
were
Yeah.
there. You talked about wanting that game that you constantly want to go back to, and for a while it was there, but now it's not. So let's go to Diablo. Let's go to
Well, what's
Diablo
interesting is,
5.
I mean, a full stop. I mean, like if we were talking about moving from Diablo 4 to Diablo 5 and moving in quotes that quickly, right? Because what? Yeah, June 2023 for Diablo 4's official release.
Right.
So then we're talking about like, and are you being crazy enough? Are you saying BlizzCon in 2026 is when they're announcing it?
I I think could there be a teaser? Could there
Yeah,
just be I think first you need to get Diablo in a Diablo game, right? You need that second expansion to start doing that.
yeah,
Get some goodwill, be like, oh yeah, Diablo's in it. And then I think you could. I think like the market is so crowded, attention is needed. Diablo 4 had its love it or not, like Diablo 4 gained a lot of negative attention where like it's almost hard to outrun some of the criticism around it. Fair or unfair, right? Like
yeah.
Diablo 4 became memeified in some circles and it just can't get past that. Where I think from a business standpoint, the only way to get past that is with a Diablo 5, is a new game to kind of
Yeah.
shake up the market. So what does that look like?
Man. Well, all right. So if we're spitballing
We're
and jumping on the
spitballing.
plane here.
We are writing down notes. We're gonna pass them to Rod Ferguson,
Rod's listening.
and
I'm sure. Yeah, Rod's talking
we're
about it.
gonna
Right?
we're gonna get this made.
I think if we're spearheading this and chasing this down, right, I would think that I would almost say that Diablo 5 is called Diablo or something else. We dropped the 5, and I would look at it to be a fresh start in a lot of regards, where I would say, cool, especially I'm going to say it, and I don't mean it because I enjoyed the game and clearly did fine. But after the failure or the Diablo 4 not meeting expectations or something, right? Because we're talking about a game that launched as Diablo live service game. So it was the idea that I would, if we're talking about the launch of Diablo, I would bet if we talked to the team there and the PR interviews, many of them would say, well, we're not thinking about a Diablo 5. We're thinking about the next season, next expansion. This is the Diablo forever kind of thing. So if we're going to get out and say 3 years removed from that, we're doing a teaser for Diablo 5. I think first off, the teaser is going to be very light and thin. And I think that eventually the game you talk about, if you don't talk about it there, needs to be the fact that like, we're going back to basics. We know how much people love Diablo 2 and why they love Diablo 2, even the Reforged edition or whatever. So it's like we're going back to a game that isn't dialed into being online, that isn't dialed into having seasons and all this stuff. We're making a Diablo that anyone can jump into. It's got the hallmarks of the series, but it is a brand new story set out of what we've done before. Like I think that's where you start talking about like, all right, we're shaking this thing up in a way that we're trying to welcome everybody to Diablo and show how great it would be, and that's where my head jumps to. But am I crazy? Would that even alienate the audience more?
I like that idea actually, Greg.
Yeah,
I one like the rebranding, and maybe in some ways like with that Microsoft acquisition too, of like, hey, this is now Diablo, right? We're going to start fresh, and in some ways that allows for uh, a clean slate. I like that. Moving away and going back to more of those D2 roots, you had me intrigued by the you're not going to have to be online. An
I feel like
offline.
that you're
Oh,
talking about all the shit Diablo 4 got, right? Like that's the course correction of like, okay, cool, you don't want that, then we're not making that.
or give both options. Like, hey, this
Yeah,
well,
well, yeah, there is. Yeah,
right,
you can play online, obviously, but
right. Yeah, I think you got to have both. But
there's no online at all. Right.
this is it. You can never play on the internet again. Um, no, but I really I like that. And then I think like having those tools for people to mod the game. Also, there's that element of making it weird and making it cool and adding in things that people wouldn't necessarily think of, and just get fucking weird with it.
Yeah,
Um, Here's what I'm going to propose.
lay it on me.
I would like to see no classes.
Oh, okay. Tell me more.
So in every ARPG, you have a starting point of this particular class, right? What if you just started out as this generic adventurer and were able to start to build your character into a sorcerer, into a necromancer, and then
Sure.
grabbing all around and just again have more of that freedom of choice. It's never been done. In fact, I mean like every ARPG has that as like your archetype. What if we
Yeah,
didn't?
yeah. Start stealing the pay. We're seeing that in games like Avowed, right? Where it's like, well, dual wield this or do that or just switch over there. Like, yeah, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, and like the skill tree really letting you build the character you want to build, whether it is you're stealing a bit from being a monk or whatever and a warrior. That's totally fine. I love that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Write that down, Rod. Just saying, we can set this up. Um, Open world. So Diablo 4 was the first one to include an open world. I don't think they should have that in Diablo 5.
I don't think they will. If they're going the path we're talking
Well,
about,
yeah,
right?
in
Like I
in
think,
in our version, but like let's just get some
yeah.
notes, in general. If they were like, "Oh yeah, we love this idea, but we're going to slap an open world on it." Here I am saying, "Please don't."
Yeah, I could see that, right? I think again, getting back to a more curated experience, right? Curated environments, like more purpose in there for what's going on and leading your players through that on that journey, right? So that they're not seeing whatever they're seeing whenever they see it. Instead, they're seeing it when you want them to see it and going through that. That's interesting.
Thank you. I've been contemplating a lot on
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
Uh,
I'm sure this is all you think about when you're on your treadmill.
that and just like, oh, how many more miles do I have today? Why am I so sweaty? Just all of that. Um, but it's fine. It's fine. I live. Okay, so no open world because that would be bad. A classless system. What about the campaign? So this was the first time we've ever been able to skip a campaign. You can't do that in Path of Exile. You can't do that in Last Epoch. This was like one of those things that, like, as a person who loves ARPGs, that I feel like I found out, like, you should be careful what you wish for. Like, this was very much that, where for years I
Yeah.
was like, oh, campaign, right? I just got to keep like trudging through it. And then I saw it like, oh, I'm never going to have to do it again. And obviously you don't now, but I kind of miss it. I kind of miss like having to interact with the story, having clear benchmarks of like what success is.
Mhm.
Where like, oh, I got my character to beat this boss. So I know I'm halfway here. I'm so, as opposed to, all right, I'm just going to jump into the fields and start mowing things down. So then I get to go and mow them down again. Like, it breaks it up a little bit. But I'm curious, like, you not a huge fan of the story. So
Yeah,
is
not
that
is
better or
yeah.
worse?
That would be a turn off to me. And I wonder again in this economy of time that we talk about, where yeah, there's all these other games, but then there's all these other shows, there's all these movies, your life, your job, your kid. If that would also, I think you can still have everything we're talking about and not do that. But then I'm also wondering. I guess here's the balance to it, where if I'm not having to roll a character every season, if it is that I'm making my character and I'm playing through and I can come back to that character and do the new content and do the new thing and there's whatever, I wouldn't feel as bad about, or I wouldn't dislike it. Because yeah, you can still skip the cutscenes then when you're going through. It's just a reason to fight again. Maybe there's some way to shake it up where bosses have an augment or a switch or something like that. But yeah, for me, repeating a story as we saw with Vessel of Hatred is always a trudge for me. Where I like the new thing. I like not knowing what's coming around the corner. I like not doing it. But I hear you. And again, I think the course correction here would be being like, we're doing the classic Diablo thing that everybody loves, but just putting a little bit of a modern spin on it. And so I think that would work here either way, where we're keeping a classic and you have to replay it every time, or keeping a classic, but you can skip it for your future characters. Because again, I'm wondering if they're really going to push doing multiple characters if my one character can be anything. Because I think that happens organically, where it would be I'm playing through this character and I'm doing all these choices and I'm making all this thing and I get to the end or hours in and I have this character who feels different. That would motivate me to go, well, let's go the other way. Let's go jump out and make a new character and blah blah blah.
So we're divided. There's a rift. We won't figure this out.
We can't.
We can't. Maybe make it optional. Maybe, well, no, it already is optional. What the hell am I saying? No, make it mandatory. I don't know. Let's ruminate. Let's sit on that
Audience, what
one.
do you want? Let us
Yeah,
know, audience.
please, yeah, chime in. Is the skip campaign button a mistake? Although I will say, I think for all those people who put in all that great work behind the scenes and doing all the great side quests, that whole part of the game just gets completely neglected because you would never do a side quest now.
Yeah,
You would
100%.
like, there was no point to it, and then it's like all that world building is kind of lost. And I would hate to see a future game go like, oh, well, nobody engaged with the side quest stuff, we shouldn't put it in. Then that's people losing jobs. That's
No, that's a
AI
great point.
coming in
That
and
is
just
interesting.
doing nonsense. Um,
But again, I think like with what we're talking about and bringing it back more towards a classic Diablo, I think that stuff would be put there and given importance. But like then it's like, I guess, are you toying with choices? Like, is that something that would make that more interesting? If it was, you're going in and it is side with this person or kill this person. At what point do we lose what
right.
Diablo is altogether and we're just making an RPG rather than an ARPG?
That is true. I mean, like, I think like the other part of Diablo though, it has in its first iteration and second, it pushed what, and I guess third, right? It pushed what an ARPG is, right?
Sure.
It continually evolved the genre, and three took some leaps that I think were less popular, but it still did a lot of new things. I'm not opposed to a new thing for Diablo 5. I think that would be exciting. I what I think I would want most from the Diablo 5 is risks. And I feel like that's harder because of how big Activision is, right?
Yeah.
Risk is not something that is maybe the best thing to market. Like we're taking a wild swing on this franchise, but I feel like that's where the real magic is in taking these risks and doing something that's outside the box. I feel like Diablo 4 just didn't take enough risks, hasn't
Mhm.
taken enough risks to like really innovate on itself. Like have a in my opinion, I don't think there's been horrible seasons. The first season was rough just because like they just didn't know what they were doing, but there haven't been horrible seasons. But
They're just having the most exciting
right,
seasons.
they haven't taken the
Yeah.
risks to have a failure because it they repeat the same things continuously. Let's just go back to the borrowed power and a couple new items. I would love Diablo 5 to take a big risk. Like what you're talking about. Like maybe it isn't. Maybe that is a little different. Maybe that does veer a little too much towards an RPG, but we can make it work. We can turn it into more of an ARPG.
It's just interesting because we're talking about how we want more risk, but then also we want it to be more like the Diablos of the past, right? And so it's finding that sweet spot again of like, okay, cool. Here's how and who are they targeting? How big do they think? Like, how the hardest part about all this, I guess, is like not knowing the real rubber meets the road. What is the Blizzard and Microsoft interpretation of how Diablo 4 did and is doing? Like, did it do well enough as is at launch of like because it everybody was playing this thing when it launched, right? And so you got them through the door, and even with like, yeah, Game Pass wasn't even a thing yet. So like you got people to buy this game. So it did well on the monetary side, and then how many are you keeping, and how like for this, that, and the other, like how much do you really want to stray? We're in a for you to say you want them to take risks. We're in such a risk averse state of the video game industry, right? Where it is batten down the hatches and do what works. And Xbox has been great, obviously, about doing stuff like South of Midnight, Avowed, like, hey, we're gonna do things that are new but are classic, somewhere in between. I don't know with Diablo and a new Diablo what you do. Maybe that's the thing too of like, hey, maybe that's actually it. Maybe this is what we're missing is hey, Diablo 4 is not going to stop. There's still going to be seasons. There's still going to be all the online. There's still going to be that fast and frantic gameplay and leveling that you like or whatever. But Diablo 5 or Diablo colon whatever we're calling it is going to be this more classic Diablo, and we see that they can exist at the same time. But even that gets messy of why you wouldn't be doing whatever you're doing in Diablo colon inside of Diablo 4. But if Diablo 4 is staying on as if we're getting into a hey, Diablo colon, whatever the hell we're calling it, but not 5, is our version of the annual Call of Duty, whereas Diablo 4 is our version of Call of Duty Warzone. Maybe that starts to make more sense, right? We're giving you a more digestible Diablo and Diablo colon, not 5, that you can go in and you can craft your hero and you can, mess with all the skill trees and whatever. And when you get to the end and roll credits, that's the end of it. Like, we're not that we'll give expansions over time, but we're not giving you you're running this infinitely. We do want you to go roll a new character and try out that skill tree and build it up that way. That could be interesting.
So did we do it? Did we just nail it down?
I
Rod?
think what we did
Like
is just showed why Rod Ferguson has so much gray hair. You know what I mean? Is him and Blizzard sits there, and I say this as somebody who's gray as hell. Somebody sits there like, oh, what are we doing? How
mean,
do we do this? How do we serve the people who say they want a more traditional Diablo but want us to take risks?
you
Yeah.
can't please everybody. And you alluded because I sent you that article about like Rod had made some comments about not catering to the blasters, not catering as much to
Yeah.
the people on the high end, but trying to like appeal to the casual audience too. And I I think that's the hardest part of any of this is like Diablo's been around for so long, and it has
Yep.
touched on all of these spectrums of what gaming is, from the extremely casual who maybe played Diablo 1 in a PC cafe back in the 90s to somebody whose first Diablo was Diablo 4 and picked it up and is used to that gameplay, has never touched the other ones. And I mean, there are people who have never played Diablo 4 that are still just playing Diablo 3 right now. Like,
Yep. Yep.
or people who only play Diablo 2. Like that exists, which is just wild to me. And I don't know how you cater to all of them. I don't think you can.
Yeah.
But I think like if you're going to compete, right, and you're not just competing against the other RPGs, and you're not just competing against the other major parts of the market with your Fortnites and what have you, you're also going to have to compete with yourself. It's got to be. I think taking a risk is in some ways the safest bet because
Yeah,
then
and
it
again, I
stands
think
out.
we're on to something / I'm on to something by saying maybe they're not putting 5 on it, and they're being clear that like if you want the riskless version, that's Diablo 4, and that's there, and it's not going anywhere, and even promise another expansion beyond the expansion you just put out or whatever, and then we're doing this other offshoot that is a smaller, for lack of a better term, which isn't what you want to sell at Diablo, right? We're back to Assassin's Creed, right? Where it's like we have the giant Assassin's Creed Shadows, right? But we also have Assassin's Creed Mirage. Whereas if you've been looking for the classic Assassin's Creed, it's there. Don't do the whole thing of it started as a DLC and now it's become this. Nobody likes that, but
That would be weird. It would be weird for this game. It's only had decade-long iterations, right? Except for
yeah,
D1 to D2, it's been a decade in between every other game. To have more of it, I mean, the knee-jerk reaction is like, no, no, it can't. But the other part is like, if it may not be the worst thing because then there's more iteration, right? There's more iteration
yeah.
along the way. There is more room for risk and then growth because stagnation doesn't help. Like you got to take some risks, and I like that safety net of Diablo colon, but not Diablo colon. Diablo's colon, that's different. We don't need
We want to
that.
stay out of Diablo's colon.
We're gonna avoid that
Yeah.
at all costs. Um, okay, well we fixed it. We nailed
Fix it,
down
done.
Diablo
Ship
5.
it.
We'll be in Irvine shortly with our pitch.
We'll be in while they're like, and here's everything that doesn't make sense about what you just said and why we would never do that.
That we are all now dumber thanks to you.
For having listened to you idiots.
Who let you in here? You're just using your press credentials to get us in, and I would appreciate that. Okay, so I've taken up a lot of your time here tonight, Greg, and you're always so generous.
It's always a
I
pleasure.
know Paris Lilly has that moniker of being like one of the nicest guys in the business, and I'm gonna put my vote out for Greg Miller.
Thank you. I'm sick of Paris getting all the credit for being nice.
Right, you can play heel, but genuinely, you're just a nice dude. So thank you for coming by.
Thanks for having me as
Thanks
always.
for hanging out and chatting. We haven't had as much opportunity to chat as of late because you're horribly
It's
busy.
always busy. Yeah, it's always busy around here.
Yeah, which is fine. And you got a family. This is honestly you're in like because Ben is 3, right?
Yeah.
You're in the worst of it. This is as bad as it gets.
And soon he's gonna get his own interests and have to go do his own things.
No, but like when they turn 4, it's like some kind of magical. Like
oh really?
2 and 3 was awful for us. 4 is like a switch. It just and then I'm not gonna say it's smooth sailing, but
smooth sailing till teenagers.
Ooh, yeah, I'm on the precipice. My kid is going to the high school that I teach at.
That's cool.
It is cool.
Is he excited about that?
Yeah, there's some excitement and then also some like consternation of like, oh yeah, like kids are gonna know who you are and might have you as a teacher, and then I'm like, some of your friends are gonna come to my house, and I've tried to separate these lives as best I could.
That's funny.
Not a fan of that.
New world for you.
I know, brand new. Okay, well, let's close it out as we always do with a moo, moo, moo,
No.
yay.